history books don't tell the whole story of the American West. Some of the best stories I found weren't in an archive. They were buried in the comments beneath a 30-second video. Stories about grandfathers, branding pens, old saddles, forgotten ranches. Tiny details that historians rarely record. But families never forget. And after reading thousands of those conversations, I realized they reveal something remarkable about the American West. Howdy, Chip Schweiger here. Welcome to another edition of Way Out West, where the stories of the American West are told, cowboy wisdom is earned, and the legacy of the American cowboy still rides on. There's something about the American West that invites conversation. Maybe it's because no one owns its story. It belongs to too many people. To the vaquero in northern Mexico, to the rancher in Nevada, to the Florida cracker cowboy pushing cattle through palmetto scrub, to the black drover on the Chisholm Trail, to the Hawaiian paniolo, and to the family whose grandfather worked one small ranch and never became famous enough for a history book. That's one of the reasons I started Way Out West, not simply to tell stories, but to keep listening for the ones that history almost left behind. So today on the show, I'm going to share what I've learned about the American West from thousands of comments on social media. It's a slightly different kind of episode, I get it, but after reading conversations from ranchers, horsemen, historians, and everyday folks who simply love the West, I've realized those comments reveal something history books often can't. Before we saddle up, remember you'll find additional resources for today's episode in the show notes at wayoutwestpod.com/cowboy comments. Welcome back. I'll admit something. When I first started posting regularly on social media, I assumed the comments would mostly be about facts. Did I get a date right? Did I pronounce something correctly? Did I miss an important detail? And sometimes they are, but much more often they're about identity. Someone writes, "That's not how we wore pearl snaps." Now at first glance, it sounds like they're correcting a shirt, but read a little further and you'll discover they're talking about their dad, or their grandfather, or the ranch where they grew up. The shirt isn't really the point. The memory is. And that's something I've come to appreciate. People aren't simply protecting historical facts, they're protecting family history. And those aren't always the same thing. One pattern surprised me almost immediately. The older followers rarely argue first. They tell stories first. My granddad always, or I remember helping, or back in the 50s. Those are my favorite comments because they're oral history. Little fragments of everyday life that never make it to the books. Sometimes someone remembers how their grandfather tied a wild rag. Sometimes they describe branding day. And sometimes they explain why one ranch did something entirely different from another one. Now, none of those stories alone changes history, but together they make history richer. Historians spend years looking for primary sources. Sometimes one appears underneath a 30-second video about cowboy hats. If there's one lesson the comments have reinforced, it's this. There has never been one cowboy culture. Spend enough time reading responses and you'll hear from Texas, then Nevada, then Florida, then Alberta, then maybe northern Mexico, Hawaii, sometimes Australia, sometimes Brazil. Everyone recognizes something familiar, and everyone notices something different. That's why I use the word evolved so often. The cowboy wasn't copied from one place to another. He adapted. The country changed, the cattle changed, the weather changed and the work changed. So naturally, the cowboy changed too. Different gear, different horses, different traditions, but the same occupation. And that's one of the things I love most about Western history. It's connected without being identical. Another thing I've noticed, people care deeply about giving credit. One person reminds me about the Spanish vaqueros. Another points out black cowboys. Someone else mentions Native Americans, or women, or immigrants. At first glance, those comments can look like disagreements, but most of the time, they aren't. They're asking for someone not to be forgotten, and I think that's a worthy instinct. The history of the West was never built by one group of people. It was built by generations whose stories cross paths in ways that were often complicated. If Way Out West has a mission, it's to make the picture larger, not smaller. For every debate, there are dozens of questions. Why pearl snaps? Why are cowboy shirts buttoned clear to the top? Why do some cowboys wear wild rags and others don't? Why are buckaroos different from Texas cowboys? Those questions are why I started this publication. Curiosity spreads. One question becomes another story. One comment becomes another episode. One memory becomes another article. I've learned just as much from readers as I have from archives, and maybe that's the biggest surprise of all. The biggest lesson I've learned isn't really about social media, it's about the West. The West is still very much alive. Not because everyone agrees, not because history is simple, but because people still care enough to tell their stories, to remember a grandfather, to defend a tradition, to ask questions, to keep learning. If nobody cared, there wouldn't be thousands of comments. There would be only silence. And that's why I'll keep reading them. Not because every comment is correct, but because every now and again, someone leaves behind a story that no history book has ever captured. And that's a reminder that the story of the American West isn't finished. It's still being written, one conversation at a time. Okay, before we ride out today, we've got just one more thing. Yep, that distinctive call from Buster the Bull means it's time again for our Cowboy Glossary term of the week. And today's term is oral history. So an oral history is exactly what it sounds like. Memories, stories, and first-hand accounts passed from one person to another rather than written down. Long before historians collected interviews, ranch families preserved their history around kitchen tables, branding fires, and chuck wagons. Some of the best examples today show up in places you never expect, like the comments beneath a video on social media. Well, that's all for this episode of Way Out West. Thanks for riding with me here again. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and share the show with someone who loves the history, culture, and traditions of the American West. And if you'd like to see more of the work we're doing, you can visit ridewayoutwest.com. And while you're there, take a few minutes to explore the Way Out West Journal, where we dive even deeper into the people, places, and history that continue to shape the West today. That's ridewayoutwest.com. Until next time, this is Chip Schweiger, reminding you that the American West isn't just a place on the map. It's a way of life, a spirit of independence, and a legacy worth preserving. We'll see you down the road.